you want to, I'm wondering if we should just give 1 or 2 more minutes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I see that we have a lot of people coming in. So, you know, we can just continue the repartee until, you know, everybody joins. I think, wow, we have a lot of people. I am like simultaneously encouraged and terrified.
There was a lot of outreach.
Oh, I appreciate that. Really, that's awesome. Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome.
I know you certainly did your part. Yeah.
So maybe we should welcome the folks from North Carolina on the call.
All right.
What's
Welcome,
up, y'all?
North Carolina.
Beautiful, beautiful state.
I just got back from there.
It is beautiful. A lot of trees. A lot of nice people here.
And you guys get to cast a meaningful vote for president.
Hopefully, if it's not suppressed.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
No, there's going to be an attempt by about a $20 million campaign that the Republican Party has put into place, and they're going to contest the votes. Is what they're going to do. So we've got an operation to contest the contesters, because that's what they're going to say. It's fraudulent, these absentee ballots. So that's what I'm working on right now.
This is what we've come to in America. Yeah.
They're only going to say it's fraudulent if they lose.
Yeah.
Well, we're also anticipating armed militias with Confederate flags, that's what they do down here.
Wow. Okay, maybe give it another minute. Yeah, I think most people, it looks like we've got a really great crowd. Wow. I'm like,
We do have a great basketball rivalry between the ACC between Duke and Carolina, which is one of the most enjoyable aspects of living here. But I miss
as a Marylander, my only problem with that rivalry is one of those teams gets to win each time they play.
It's okay if you have a flawed perspective on college basketball, Dan. I'm not gonna hold it against you. I'm a Maryland fan.
I grew up watching those teams beat up on the University of Maryland my entire life.
But Lefty,
although I did have the pleasure when I came back as a Stanford alum, and I went to a Maryland game, and the Maryland fans pointed at a small group of Stanford students and said, "You suck, you suck, you suck." And I'm like, now I know what those people from Carolina, and now I know how they feel.
Dean Smith, baby.
okay, I think we're gonna get started here. So welcome everyone. Hello, salam, shalom. Thank you for all being here this evening. My name's Fatima Argan, and I'm Vice President of the Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society, which is sponsoring this wonderful event tonight, better known as JIDS. JIDS is a relatively young organization and has a very passionate following of people who see power in unity rather than division, something that's critically important, especially now as we approach the upcoming elections, which reflects the divisiveness of our electorate. I hope you're all ready for tonight's discussion about Muslims, Jews, and American politics, which I think will be a real treat. We're all fortunate to have two amazing speakers tonight from each faith tradition who will start the program off by giving us a sense on a personal level of how his faith and associated culture guides and informs his perspective and engagement in the American political process. These perspectives will give us all more to think about in this very important election season. Given that we're now living in a uniquely turbulent time with a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic occurring simultaneously with a well overdue call for justice for many communities of color, combined further with an environmental and an economic crisis, America is clearly at a pivotal point. And I suspect these topics will be part of the mix and will give us a lot to talk about. While the trajectory of Muslims and Jews with respect to their engagement with American politics throughout our 240 plus history has followed different patterns. There have all speakers, and we hope the audience too will be exploring those as well in tonight's program. So I want to start off by thanking both Joel and Waj for being part of our program, and to personally thank the JIDS team who helped design and organize tonight's program, in particular Dan Spiro, Herb Levy, and a number of others. Kay Halpern, who is also one of my Sisterhood of Salam Shalom sisters, but in another local chapter. Okay, so just a quick overview of tonight's program. Each panelist will give their opening remarks, and then we'll open it up to the audience for Q&A. After that, we're going to let the speakers take a breather and let you, the audience, weigh in and have your own discussion among yourselves. And then finally, the last part of the program, we'll bring in the speakers again and allow them to provide their thoughts and observations on the audience discussion and final remarks. So before we get started, just a few, some quick housekeeping and ground rules. The session will be recorded. So if you're not comfortable being recorded, now is the time to hop off. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a bunch of commands, including the mute function to the left and the chat box in the center. Please, if you have questions, type them in the chat box and we'll address them after the speaker's remarks. Once we get into the audience only part of the program, we'll ask you to please use the raise hand function, which can be found by clicking on the participants. You'll see that there in the same area at the bottom center on that part of the screen. And you'll see a blue hand, and that'll tell you that you're in the right place. So finally, a couple more rules. Keep yourselves on mute to reduce background noise and allow others to speak without interruption. If I cut you off, please don't take offense. My objective is to make sure everyone has a chance to be heard, and also to make sure that I get you out of here on time. And I'm going to do my best to get us all out of here at 8:30, because I do understand that people have other commitments. Finally, I don't think I have to say this to this audience, or at least I hope I don't have to, but please use decorum and respect to guide your comments and suggestions to either the speakers, other members of the audience, or myself. And one more thing, this program is really about you. It's about you as the audience, and as much as it is about our two wonderful speakers who will provide valuable personal perspectives on the topic we'll be exploring tonight. We want to make sure the audience is engaged as well, and I will make every effort to make sure everyone that wants to will get a chance to speak. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. I'll introduce Joel first. Joel is the founder and executive director of the Middle East Working Group. For over 30 years, Joel's gained honors and hurrahs for both exposing voter suppression and for being a man on the forefront on climate change. Joel Segal received his undergraduate and law degrees from the University of North Carolina, where he focused on constitutional law and conflict resolution studies. Joel Segal is a co-founder and the national director of Multiracial Climate Action Network. JAMN is lobbying elected officials and educating the public about the need for an expedited transition to renewable energy, millions of green jobs, environmental justice, and millions of solar or green energy affordable apartments in order to end homelessness in America. Joel was a founder of the 2000 Universal Health Care Movement and co-authored HR 676, Representative Conyers' now heralded Expanded and Improved Medicare for All bill. He was one of the leading architects for passage of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. I'll now introduce Wajahat Ali. As a New York Times contributing op-ed writer, highly sought after political commentator, TED speaker, recovering attorney, and award-winning playwright, Wajahat Ali is undoubtedly a jack of all trades. But across his many roles, one thing remains constant. Ali uses his platform to fight tirelessly for the social change we need in our country, and he isn't afraid to get personal while doing it. His upcoming memoir, Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American, forthcoming in the fall of 2021, will share stories, both hilarious and poignant, of Ali's experience growing up a Muslim Pakistani American in an effort to inspire a new vision of America's multicultural identity. He's also the lead author of the investigative report Fear Inc., Roots of the Islamophobia Industry in America, and an alumni of the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which is a programmatic experiment to build Muslim-Jewish relations in North America that enable individuals and communities to encounter the other authentically with neither avoidance of complicated differences nor litmus tests for participation. So with that, I will, Joel, would you like to start first?
If it's okay, I'd like to have my brother Waj start. That's all right.
Okay, Waj, do you want to start first?
That's very good, Joel. I appreciate it. Let the Muslim go first on the plank. Test the waters, O Muslim. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. Thank you, Fatima, for inviting me. I like this monotheistic Brady Bunch that we have. I'm living next to Norman and Herb and Abdul. So that's our America. And that's the way America should be. I have 15 minutes to tell you everything about Islam in America and the story of 1.7 billion Muslims and 1,400 years of Islamic civilization, and to come up with the lasting peace between Israel and Palestinians, and to come up with the course to save American democracy. And I will. I'm the token representative of all Muslims on earth. And with the power invested in me by myself, I will be the declarative authoritarian voice on Islam. And also, I would like to offer this opportunity, me and Joel both, that we accept fatwas. We accept all fatwas from every religion. So it's like visa. Anywhere you go, we'll accept fatwas from any religious identity, because I'm sure we're going to piss off everyone. But we talked about this before. We want to have a very honest, forthright conversation today. Blunt, not for the sake of being disrespectful, but if you have to acknowledge the elephants in the room, because too much is at stake. And so I'm going to try my best to be as honest and sincere as possible. I'm not a fan of hummus diplomacy. And what I say is hummus diplomacy is oftentimes in interfaith organizations, it's basically what it gets reduced to is the following. I eat hummus. You eat hummus. We all eat hummus. Let's eat hummus. I'm like, I love hummus. Who doesn't like hummus? But let's talk about the issues at hand. And I know some of you come from communities where that's all you have, and to dig deeper. And even if we step on each other's toes, the intention is that sometimes these uncomfortable conversations lead to better relationships. And
okay, friend.
And I know Kathy says it's not even close to Kumbaya interfaith group, not even close. I realize it. This is my first time doing it. Also, finally, I would like to say, I believe in every religious tradition, it is a sin to bore an audience. I think there is a verse in Corinthians 2, Trump's favorite Bible chapter, that verily thou shalt not boreth an audience, or thou shalt endeth in hell. So it is a sin to bore an audience. I hope I do not bore you. Very quickly, for those of you who do not know about this tribe called the Muslims, Muslims in America have been here for 400 years. 400 years. Anywhere from 5 to 30% of the slave trade that came here forcibly against its will was Muslim. So if you really reflect on it for a second, it's deeply profound that Muslim labor, sweat, dreams, and pain have fertilized this country's soil. Yet, fast forward to 2016, and Donald Trump said he wanted a complete and total ban on Muslims coming to this country until we could figure out what the hell was going on. And according to all the data, about 45 to 50% of Americans still think that Islam is incompatible with the United States. And still a significant population thinks that Obama is Muslim. And because he's Muslim, he is somehow foreign and anti-American. And I am here to tell you that Obama is a Muslim. Thank you for voting for him. Thank you for voting for our first Muslim president, 75% of American Jews. He is not Muslim. If he is Muslim, he's the worst Muslim of all time because he openly eats bacon, drinks alcohol, and says he goes to church and is a Christian. So if that is a Muslim, the worst Muslim of all time. But that type of fear-mongering against Obama, literally using Islam as a slander, as a kryptonite against Obama, shows you where we are. And I grew up as a child of Pakistani Muslim immigrants in the Bay Area, California. Anyone here from Bay Area? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? One. Nice. Ramon, thank you. I grew up the son of Pakistani Muslim immigrants who were able to come to this country thanks to the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, which made it illegal to have discrimination based on national origin and lifted the emergency quotas that were placed on immigrants in the 1920s. Now, in the 1920s, the original invaders were who? Anyone want to take a guess? Eastern European Jews, Italians, and Irish Catholics. Fast forward, that story doesn't change. It's just a remake. Now those invaders are Mexicans, the undocumented immigrants, Muslims, and Middle Easterners, right? But thanks to that opening, my father, who was an 18-year-old in Pakistan, a student, was able to come with his older brother, Sultan Uncle, to America to taste the American dream. And because he was able to come here on the Einstein visa, the visa that is given to those with exceptional talents, the same visa that was given to Melania Trump, whose exceptional talent was, I think, posing naked on a fur rug on a Trump plane. My dad got the same visa. He was able to slowly but surely build the American dream, right? He said at that time, when he used to see another brown person, forget Muslim, another brown person, they used to cross the street and exchange contact because it was so rare to see another South Asian. And they lifted themselves up with their bootstraps, even though they had the privilege of education. They used to drive 2 states at that time to get a halal meat. They used to build their own mosque, sometimes in abandoned liquor stores, right? And so you saw this community building upon the work and labor of African-American Muslims, and you saw a lot of immigrant Muslims come, and lo and behold, in 1980, I was born the only child of Pakistani Muslim immigrants, and my parents thought it would be hilarious not to teach their only child English, because who needs English in the United States of America? So they dropped me off at Child's Hideaway Preschool with only 3 phrases of English. Shut up, because my mother used to say shut up. Idiot, because my mother used to say shut up, idiot. And oh, Pasgerio, because if you guys grew up in the 80s, you remember that Spaghetti commercial, oh, Spaghetti. That's all I knew. Shut up, idiot, oh, Pasgerio. I was also very healthy, which is another way of saying big boned, which is another way of saying fat. And this was the 1980s when there weren't any Dove soap commercials on positive body images. So I was fat. I used to wear husky pants. I didn't speak any English, and I was a token brown and Muslim guy in my school. As you can say, I was the winner. But somehow I ended up graduating from UC Berkeley with an English major, and I ended up marrying the high school varsity cheerleader who's also a brilliant doctor, who also won most attractive. So hashtag it gets better. Hooray, I love America. It's a great country. To quote the opening lines of Godfather, one of the great movies, I believe in America. But the American dream for many has turned out to be the American nightmare based upon your ethnicity, your citizenship, your religion, or your gender. American Muslims, for the most part, especially the immigrants in the 80s, were conservative, right? Family values, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, faith. Oh, we're not like those immigrants, the Mexicans. We're not like those blacks. We wanted to rush towards whiteness because you just knew this thing called white in America, white is right. America likes whites. It doesn't like blacks. So a lot of the South Asians and the Arab Americans, they tried to rush towards whiteness, and they realized the American dream. And in 2000, the majority of American Muslims, not African American Muslims, the majority of American Muslims who are South Asian and Arab, they voted for George W. Bush. I did not vote for George W. Bush. I did my best to beg Muslims not to vote for George W. Bush. But the question then becomes, why did Muslims who at that time, especially immigrant Muslims, it was the first time they decided to vote as a bloc, why did they go for George W. Bush? Well, first and foremost, because of this whole thing, faith, family values, taxes. But another reason was because George W. Bush, through his outreach coordinator, Grover Norquist, acknowledged Muslims. He went to a mosque. He stepped inside a mosque. He did active outreach. He promised to end these special laws that were actually discriminating against Muslims, in particular Arab Americans, and locking them up, right? So he did the outreach, and Muslims felt like, wow, we're getting invited to the party. They actually did outreach. The Democrats kind of either take us for granted or treat us like kryptonite. We're going to do the Muslim bloc. Now, it's important to realize African-American Muslims, much like African-Americans, said, yo, what the hell are you guys doing? This is terrible for our country. We're going to go vote Democrat. If you were paying attention, Florida went for Bush by about 538 votes. Guess where were the two? My home state of California, Florida. 9/11 happens. The two towers fall. I am a senior at UC Berkeley, undeclared, and FML, as the kids say. Instead of joining the Indian Student Association, I joined the Muslim Student Association. I am now student leader of the Muslim Students Association, and now everyone's expecting me to defend 1,400 years of Islamic civilization and prove to America that 1.7 billion Muslims are moderate. And ever since then, for the past 19 years, we've engaged in the my loyalty and patriotism and moderation is held as suspect in front of a nameless judge, jury, and executioner that no matter what I do sees me as a potential extremist. And I'm supposed to condemn violent acts done by violent people I've never met in countries I've never visited. It is exhausting. As a result of this, fast forward, that same American Muslim population, which is the most diverse religious communities in America, 4 million or so American Muslims, where about 20% are Arab, 25% are South Asian, 25 to 30% are Black, where American Muslims, women, are the most educated women of any religious community, just behind Jewish women. This is where we give ourselves a round of applause, Jews and Muslims. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Where overwhelming majority of American Muslims reject violent extremism, where American Muslims, more so than any religious group, condemn violence done against collateral damage, where American Muslims still believe in the American dream, where American Muslims, for the majority, the most part, are above average educated, optimistic about America's future, reject violent extremism, help law enforcement. If you're paying attention, this is all win, right? That community, as a result of what happened after the post 9/11 climate, became Democrat, to the point where, coinciding with Jewish Americans, about 3/4 of American Muslims voted for Clinton. About 3/4 of American Muslims voted for Obama, our Muslim brother. And about 85% of Americans were against Trump and are still against Trump, okay? So this is a win. Also, most American Muslims in recent years are for an expanded government, for social security services for Americans to bridge the income divide, right? They are for Black Lives Matter. They believe in climate change, unlike our president. And American Muslims and Jewish Americans are the two religious groups and the voting community that says that one of the major concerns in the 2020 election is the increase in hate crimes. Our communities have been targeted. 2011, when our Muslim brother Barack Hussein Obama was going for re-election, a think tank, Center for American Progress in DC, came to me and said, we're seeing this spike in these anti-Muslim memes. President Obama is a Muslim. Sharia is a threat to America. Radical Islamic Brotherhood has infiltrated the White House. Where are these memes coming from? And they're being used again to attack Barack Obama. Can you do a map of this Islamophobia network? Show us the funding, show us where it's coming from, and make it 20 pages. I did the research. It was supposed to last 3 months. I spent 6 months on it. And about 2 months in, to quote Jaws, a movie from 1975, for those of you who are not millennials, I said, we're going to need a bigger boat. We did a 138-page report called Fear Incorporated, where we very quickly, we traced the funding, the intellectual network, the grassroots activists, the media players, and the political players that helped mainstream, literally create and mainstream what were once fringe talking points to the international ethersphere, right? And so that report landed with a big wave. And as a result of doing that report, we realized we're dealing with a very tight, well-funded, incestuous ecosystem that creates, promotes, and globalizes these talking points that were literally fiction and once considered fringe, such as Sharia is a threat to America. It spikes up during elections, midterm elections and presidential elections, to the point where a fictitious manufactured talking point, Sharia is a threat to America, which is about as realistic as saying as Bigfoot is a threat to America, now is used from 2012 to 2016 to 2020 by nearly every Republican presidential candidate. And as a result of that ecosystem that we uncovered, what were once considered fringe players, and I want everyone to really think about this, are now literally in the White House or consulting the Trump administration. Just let that process that. And I was warning for the last 9 years that just like love has gone intersectional, hate has gone intersectional, because they're not just against Muslims, they're also against the undocumented immigrants, the Mexicans, and by the way, they're always against the Jews, because the Protocols of Elders of Zion also has an updated remake. I was like the brown Paul Revere, the brown Cassandra, trying to tell everyone, guys, this is what's coming down the pipeline. We're witnessing the death rattle of white supremacy, which has transformed into a death march across the world. As a child is most loud right before it's put to bed. This is not going away. I know you guys are okay with it because they're attacking Muslims and undocumented. They're going to go against black people as they always do. They're going to go against Jews. We have to unite as the multicultural Avengers against Thanos. Thanos is white supremacy. I was ignored to the point of 2016. I'm in DC. I'm talking to very well-known influencers. I did this presentation in the summer before the election, and literally someone came up to me and said, I think you might be onto something with this white nationalist thing. I went home and told my wife, I'm like, we're effed. We're effed. America's not prepared. 2016, leading up to the election, with Trump's rampant Islamophobia, it was finally the first time, this is like the one dark humor, there's gonna be a lot of dark humor, where there was a positive. All those people who said, oh, you darkies, always whining and complaining about the racism, you race hustlers, we live in a post-racial society. I voted for Obama once. I listened to the Beyonce. You Black Lives Matter extremists, you Muslims with the Islamophobia. A lot of people have finally said, you might be onto something with this Islamophobia and racism. And I had Jewish allies, and I remember a Jewish rabbi invited me to the first time to a West Palm Beach synagogue. He said, we're progressive on everything except 2 issues. I'm like, let me guess, Muslims, Palestine. He goes, yep. By the way, here's my congregation. Good luck. And so it was the summer right before the election, right after Shabbat services, 350 Jews. And I was the first Muslim. And literally, I was there to say, I know some of you are voting for Trump based on Israel. I'm begging you. Right now, he's gone after the Muslims and undocumented and the black protesters. Guess who's going to go after next? And I wish you could see the crowd from my vantage points. They literally went like this. I'm like, yep, that anti-Semitic train in America is never late. And as a result of this, having seen the tea leaves, not because I'm a genius, because I did the research, about 8 years ago, I decided to join something called the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which was I was the halal guinea pig, the kosher guinea pig of this small initiative that brought 15 American Muslim leaders in their individual capacity to engage with Shalom Hartman Institute, which is a think tank with a footprint in Jerusalem and in New York, to basically do the Muslim version of the RLI and CLI, Christian Leadership Initiative and Rabbi Leadership Initiative, which is to learn about Judaism, Israel, and Zionism from Jewish scholars and to debate it in authentic Jewish tradition, right? And to see the entire spectrum of how these issues are debated. We spent 2 weeks in Jerusalem where, thanks to the partnership with Abdullah Antepli and Yossi Klein Halevi, who did it together, we spent time in Hebron. We talked to Muslims in Jerusalem. We talked to activists. We talked to settlers. I mean, it was a full court press. And the funny thing is they had me present the Fear Inc. document, the Islamophobia Network document, to their scholars. And they said, Waj, lead an hour-and-a-half conversation about Muslims in America. The funny thing is I was initially vetoed as one of the 15 people. Why? Because they said, Wajahat Ali critiqued Jews, and he's anti-Semitic because he critiques the occupation. In the Fear Inc. document, where we listed the funders, unfortunately, some of the funding went back to, anyone want to take a guess? American Jewish organizations. And we saw that some of the American Jewish organizations were very liberal on everything except national security. And under the guise of national security, they ended up funding some of the most notorious Islamophobes. I can share the story that a week before we released the Fear Inc. document, one of the funders, who's a Jewish American, said, I had no idea that $1.1 million was being sent to people like Pamela Geller and Steve Emerson and others. I thought I was funding national security. I'm telling you that $1.1 million is out. Another funder said, yo, I hate these people that you've mentioned. Daniel Pipes, David Horowitz, Frank Gaffney. It's my crazy right-wing aunt. I sit on the board. Can you take my name out? And I said, I can't. I just traced the funding. They said, crap, fine. And so I realized then that there is, just like in Muslim communities, a diversity within American Jewry where it's messy, where you don't want to condemn that one person who says crazy stuff against Muslims because that guy came and was that your kid's bat mitzvah, where it's a 1 degree of separation, where that person's your cousin, and things get messy. And we do these litmus tests where it's a purity test, usually around Israel and Palestine. And so as a result of all this, we did MLI to see if I can reach out to those Jews who I guess you could say are in the middle, where it's not just JVP, nothing against JVP, but all those Jews who we don't talk to, who aren't seen as halal. Just like they look at me and they don't see me as kosher. Because we end up talking to only those people, oftentimes, who we see as pure and perfect according to our litmus test. And just to give you an example, there are a lot of Muslims who say, I talk to all Jews except the Zionists. I'm like, wonderful. Congratulations, but many Jews in America, in some way, shape, or form, identify as Zionists. Not all, but I'll give you an example. I once talked to a guy who said, bro, I don't know much about Zionism or Israel, but my grandmother's Zionist, and she taught me to be a Zionist, so I guess I'm Zionist. I know more about Zionism than this guy does, but he still identifies in some way as a Zionist. So some Muslims who say we don't normalize with any Zionists, I say you're missing a large chunk of the pie. Now, as a result of doing MLI, I have been able to do this fantastic outreach to Jews who otherwise would never have talked to me. It's like a key that opens the doors to many who are center-left, center-right, who realize with the advent of Trumpism that we are effed in America because white supremacy is coming after all of us. And that litmus test that we've created around Israel and Palestine, which is the rampaging elephant in the room, is actually hurting us. American Muslims and Jews have decided to invest in this country. As a result of doing MLI, you're also talking to enemy number one, according to some American Muslim organizations and activists who see me as brainwashed by American Jews or sucking at the teat of American Jewish power or Thanos created by Mossad to destroy BDS. Are you guys still with me? On the DL, many of these people say, watch, we know you're a good guy, but we can't share any pictures of you and me having dinner on Facebook because then I'll get boycotted. But you're doing the work I can't do. You're like the Dark Knight. So keep on doing it. I'm like, can you at least like not throw me under the bus? No. We'll throw you under the bus. But psst, we're rooting for you. And a lot of it is due to the funding. And when I tell my Jewish friends and rabbis, they say, oh, Muslims are a lot like Jews. You guys are just as messed up as us. Good. Like they like laugh. Some dark humor. So I'm here with you today because I believe we're at a pivotal election where we are one step away from fascism. And I don't say that lightly. Where in the 2018 midterms, when Donald Trump was running on a good economy, where there was job growth, he decided to double down on only one talking point. Soros is funding a caravan of invaders that are coming across the border. The Jews are funding Middle Easterners and the undocumented and MS-13. It was a very veiled, not so veiled, white supremacist conspiracy talking point about the replacement theory, that Jews are the nerve center in international cabal, the brains behind an operation using savage blacks and browns and feminists to weaken Western civilization. That, my friends, was the only talking point of the Republican Party and Trump for the 2018 midterm elections. While he was saying that, an extremist, quoting almost the same exact words, decided to screw the optics and go in and save Western civilization by killing nearly a dozen Jews, Jewish Americans at the Tree of Life Synagogue. A few months later in Christchurch, another extremist posted a video, like a video game of him exterminating more than 50 Muslims in New Zealand, where he left behind a document called The Great Replacement, repeating these talking points, where he said that Donald Trump is a renewed symbol of white identity with whom he shares common purpose. A few months later in El Paso, a copycat killer was inspired by that manifesto and said, to me, the invaders are not Muslims, but the Hispanics. And he killed nearly 24 people, echoing the same talking point. Now we have a deep state conspiracy called the QAnon theory, which Donald Trump had a chance just 2 weeks ago to renounce, but he didn't. which is the modern day Protocols of Elders of Zion that says the Jews, the globalists, are part of an international cabal who are teaming up with liberals to run a sex trafficking conspiracy across the world. And not only are they pederasts, now we are cannibals who eat the children as well. This is where we're at. And yet our communities and certain gatekeepers in the communities have litmus tests where we destroy each other because we live in a zero-sum mindset that says that if we cave an inch on a talking point, on a person, on an organization, all will be lost on Israel and Palestine. Fight, flight. We cannot give an inch. Too much is lost. So the ends justify the means, and we have to engage in all-out quote-unquote slaughter. Does this sound familiar? Meanwhile, American Jews and Muslims are the ones who have literally the target signs on our backs, as Marjorie Greene Taylor, a Republican who just won her primary in Georgia, got invited to the White House by Donald Trump, and most likely she will be going to Congress representing House of Representatives. She is a QAnon supporter, an anti-Semite, a racist, and she just last week posted a photo of her holding an AK-47 with sunglasses in front of a poster featuring Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. I'm here because, and I will end at this, and thank you for your time. I'm sorry that I went 5 minutes over my time, because I believe in the American dream. I'm raising 3 American Muslim kids who are caramel mocha skinned with multisyllabic names, Ibrahim, Nusayba, and Khadija. And I refuse to tell them that their inheritance will be that they will be righteous victims, that their job is just to suffer and to run towards whiteness and keep their head down. Instead, I'm going to say, you too can be president. Why not you? You too can have a chance at the American dream. And damn it, when you bring your biryani next to the meatloaf and the matzah soup at the American table, your job is to turn around and lift up the other marginalized community member at that time and bring them to the American table and expand the American buffet so that all of us can experience the American dream. I'm here because we have to talk about these issues. I look forward to talking about these issues. I hope this was helpful, and I'm really encouraged that we're here together. And may we all unite to get out the vote. And whatever I missed, my brother Joel will pick up. And if I bored you, I've committed a sin. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I appreciate it. I'm listening to Joel now. Take it away,
Thank you,
Joel.
Waj. That was really great. And I'll take a moment here to echo Waj's last message, which is to vote. And if you are not registered to vote, my biggest question is, why not? You still have time. In the state of Virginia, you've got till October 13th. So anyway, off my soapbox, that is an unplanned message, but a very important one. Everybody that can vote, it's kind of like, why aren't you? With that, I will turn it over to Joel Segal. Joel, the floor is yours.
Brother Waj, I think you need to have your own TV show.
Your check is in the mail. I'll Venmo you.
I need the money badly for prescription drugs. That was an excellent presentation. I just want to give a few shout outs to Moshe Chertoff from Israel. Moshe is the lead organizer for the Meretz Party. And for those of you who don't know who the Meretz Party is, you should please Google them. They originated with the kind of a Kibbutzim socialist. They've been organizing most of the protests against Bibi Netanyahu. And Moshe, myself, and several organizations are going to be sponsoring a monthly symposium on the road to Middle East peace as the only way for peace. And we'll let you know about that. I got to give a shout out to Dan. I miss you, Dan. I spent 23 years in DC. I used to go to your JIDS events. I absolutely love them. I've got so many people here. I got, Phyllis Zolotoro and Bruce and Wynn Busman, all these people who were my family. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now, last 7 years. So first of all, just it's great to see everyone. What I'm gonna do tonight, I've been asked to talk about the Jewish community and how we vote. I'm also gonna talk about the call for a new Jewish Muslim renewal that's necessary to combat 4 things: climate change, to work for social justice, whether it's ending homelessness, jobs for all, certainly 100% clean renewable energy, and the big elephant in the room, to work for an end to the tragic conflict in the Middle East, and that's between Israel and Palestine. There's a huge constituency for a re-energized Jewish Muslim renewal. And I think Waj just outlined the single most important one, and that's the rise of white nationalism, which I see every day in North Carolina. If Trump wins or loses, let me be very clear, Trumpism will not die. Trumpism just started. With the rise of black and brown demographic changes, you're going to see a rise in white nationalism. We see the same thing in Germany. We see the same thing in Eastern Europe. And these are white nationalists that kill people. In Germany, they've assassinated elected officials. It is not going away. So there has to be much more Muslim and Jewish unity as we continue on our journey for a more perfect union. I was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. At Temple Israel, I was observant. I went to Hebrew school, junior congregation. I had an Israeli youth leader named Dov Kentov, who was an Israeli. What was inculcated in us in Charlotte, North Carolina was absolutely social justice. I remember we used to go probably at age maybe 11, 12, 13. We would go into the inner cities and the ghettos, and we would paint dilapidated housing in the black community, which really gave us the sense of injustice in the black community, which is about 400 years and continues to this day. I also remember him taking us to see the ambassador of the PLO, and I remember Dov Kentov yelling him down and screaming at him. So I was raised with the narrative, two narratives. One was that the Palestinian people wanted to kill the Jews. Number two, that Muslims were violent and extremist. And the reason why Waj, myself, Fatima, we decided that we're gonna be honest tonight. This will not be a kumbaya evening. We're gonna bring out issues that have to be dealt with if we're gonna make progress as Jews and Muslims and Christians. At the age of 20, I went to the University of Tennessee for 2 years, and I read a book on the Nakba, my first book that I ever read about what happened in 48 to the Palestinians. And I began to question what my Jewish youth teachers had taught me. We used to see a picture, let's see, Dan, see if you can relate to this, Dan. At Jewish, our Jewish schools that we went to after public school, there would be a picture of Israel, and there would be a and a hoe. And basically the message that we got was that there was no one in Israel. Jews came there, nobody was there. And we created this incredible utopia, but nobody was there. So that's called propaganda. We were propagandized. As I began my journey and began to know more Palestinians, more Arabs, I also began to study the Quran. I started studying Palestinian history, Arab history. I realized that I was wrong, that this was a much more complicated issue, Israel-Palestine. It was a much more complicated issue in terms of the Muslim community. And I started studying the Quran. I actually started reading the Quran. Then I started attending mosques. And every time I would attend, and this is largely because of Bruce and Wynn Busman, and a gentleman in my class named Arif, and Mr. Connor's office named Arif Haq. And what I realized is our cultures were so similar. We say salam, shalom. That's not something that Americans say all the time. Shalom, salam, okay. We're highly intellectual. We're very much into professional, whether it's engineering or law or medicine. We also have a sense of what the Arabs call ummah, which is unity among our cultures, unity among our people. And what I'm going to talk about now is two things. How do Jewish people vote? Why do they vote? What do we need to do to bring together Jewish and Muslims closer so we can deal with these intractable problems? Briefly, the Jewish community probably votes about 70% Democratic. 1/2 of all donations to the Democratic Party come from the Jewish community. Why do Jews largely vote Democratic? It's very simple. We have thousands of years of history of oppression. So naturally, our predilection is to vote Democrat because we see the Democrat Party as closer to our values. Social justice, racial equality, certainly pro-union. Jews have a love affair with Roosevelt. Many of the Jews who came here from Eastern Europe, like my grandparents, felt that Roosevelt was fighting for them. Democrats were pro-union. Most of my family on my mother's side were pro-union in New York City. Many of them were assassinated by corporate thugs who did not want some Eastern European Jews telling them how much money they were going to make. I would say also the fact that in the Jewish community, I really think that racism really bothers us. And the fact that the Republican Party has traditionally been associated with dog whistle racism. Now it's not dog whistle, it's bullhorn. Am I right? Waj, it's a bullhorn racism.
Yeah, it's out in the open, clear. It's so out in the open you could grab it and taste it. It's delicious.
Whether it's building the wall, Mexicans or rapists and murderers, and I would say the most horrendous thing that I've seen so far also is the ban on Muslims, which I'm not happy with the Jewish response. I think it's been silent, tepid. Same thing with the Democratic Party. Now I'm going to talk about another issue, and that's the rise of the Jewish right wing. The rise of the Jewish right wing, in my opinion, started with AIPAC. When AIPAC was first founded, believe it or not, it was founded to create peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Just as the Tea Party took over the Republican Party, the AIPAC was hijacked by the far right wing. And the trope and the narrative that they've created, and I call them the manipulatocracy, is that all Palestinians are evil. They want to destroy Israel. Islam is a violent religion. There's been millions of Jews who've been inculcated with these lies. They're very dangerous. There's also, even within the Republican Party, you'll see many Jewish intellectuals, Stephen Miller being the worst. Stephen Miller is Jewish and he's a white nationalist. So if someone could explain to me how that happened, I will take you out to dinner and get you lox and bagel or something, or I can't figure that one out. The rise of the Jewish right is for one reason and one reason only. And that is the perception that Democrats are anti-Israel. I'm sorry, yeah, Democrats are anti-Israel, Republicans are pro-Israel. I often heard in Congress that Barack Obama hated Israel. Well, that's not true. Barack Obama whose chief of staff was Rahm Emanuel, who's a friend of mine, served in the IDF. There were so many senior officials in the Obama administration who were Jewish. I don't know where, but that's the trope. I do believe it's because in their aspects and characteristics of the Jewish community, because Obama was black and had the last name Barack Hussein Obama, there was a false trope that he was a Muslim and therefore he hated Israel. I don't understand it. But that is one of the single most important splits in the Jewish community. Is many of you are for a two-state solution, some are for a one-state solution, but it's the Jewish narrative held by many conservative Jews and Reform Jews, where they conflate Palestinian nationalism with Nazi ideology, i.e., the Palestinians and every Arab and every Muslim wants to drive Israel out to the sea. In my experience, the majority of Palestinians, like Jewish people, they have Jewish friends, they're against the occupation. When I go to mosque and I talk to my Arab friends and my Muslim friends, they say we have nothing against Jewish people. Our problem is with the occupation. Let me posit something tonight. Unless Jews and Muslims who are progressive come together and really develop a unified position, whether it's the Geneva Accord, the Israeli Peace Initiative, the Arab Peace Plan, and we're going to have to not whisper but roar. We believe that there has to be an end to this conflict. There should be water sharing agreements. There should be trade. There could be a Marshall Plan of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem. We have to speak out much louder against the settlement project. I call them men with beards. I'm sorry if I offend people when I say that, but I believe it. When you have far right-wing extremists, both on the Jewish side and on the Muslim side, I think they're fake. I don't really think they're studying the Torah. I don't know if they're really studying the Quran. So therefore, those of us, we may have beards or we may not have beards. We're going to have to unite and stand strong and be willing to take those bows and arrows and say we want peace and justice in the Middle East. I'll end by saying that there is a gigantic constituency for a renewal of Jews and Muslims working together for social justice, working together for 100% cleanable energy, fighting white nationalism, fighting against radicals both in Israel, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas. It doesn't matter whether it's the settlement project, whether it's Netanyahu. We must call for a peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. It is possible. For those of you who say it's not possible, it can't happen, I would encourage you to do something else like watch basketball or sell insurance. But don't come into a movement with a fatalistic, nihilistic viewpoint that it's not possible. If that was the case, then why did Jordan sign a peace agreement with Israel? How does Sadat sign a peace agreement with Israel? How did the Oslo Accords get implemented? It is not the case. And at the end of the day, I hope in a year that maybe there could be a civil society peace process at George Mason, Jimmy Carter Conflict Resolution Center, where I didn't wait for the Democratic Party to do universal health care. I organized uninsured people online. That's how I got to Congress and Mr. Conner's office. We worked for over 13 years and Obama got elected, but it was we the people who came together and said, we want universal health care. We didn't get single payer. That's what we wanted, but we got 20 million people covered. Similarly, I think Jews and Muslims are going to have to lead this movement for this renewal and for peace in the Middle East. I hope that when you do vote, I hope that you vote Democrat. Trump is the most dangerous president we've ever had. He is a fascist. He is an authoritarian. He is a racist, and we're going to have to come together and stop him. I'm honored to be part of this process. I'm honored to be with Moshe Chertoff, who is going to help lead, I think, one of the single most important initiatives in my lifetime, and that's Jews and Palestinians and Arabs and Christians in Israel who want to talk to us because they need our help to support them. If you are Jewish in Israel and you support peace, you can get fired from your job if you're a professor. If you're Muslim in Israel and you're working for peace, your car will be booby-trapped often, and you can be beat up and threatened. So those of us who have the privilege of being in America, we're going to also try to help the progressives and the moderates in Israel to make sure that they have a voice. I'll end by saying that there's always room for education. The Jewish community has to understand two things. They have to understand the Quran, and they have never read it. So I hope we're teaching the Jewish community about the Quran and to deal with the myths that are so dangerous. All Muslims want to kill Jews. They want to kill, if you're not a believer, it's very dangerous to the point where I've heard Jewish people say we can never have peace in the Middle East because the Muslims are in the majority. They don't realize that there's Christians all in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So therefore, we can't sit down at the peace table. A lot of Jewish people say we don't have a partner in peace in Mahmoud Abbas. I was the go-between between the PLO and the U.S. Congress for 13 years. I've seen all their peace agreements. I can tell you that we do have a partner in peace in the Palestinian Authority and the PLO, but the Jewish community must understand there's been an evolution of the Palestinian leadership from armed struggle to peace. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Joel. And thank you, Waj. You guys both like outdid yourselves. Wow. I can only just say wow. So now I'm going to turn this over to the audience. I just want to hear, for the audience, I just want to hear your reactions on what you just heard. You know, they can be questions, they can be comments, they can be statements. But I just want you to react to what you just heard. And when you do so, please, you know, as a reminder, the participants button is at the bottom center of your screen. If you'll click on that, and I'll go through it with you just to make sure everybody's got it. You should see a screen, and then there should be, well, darn, what's going on here? Usually, okay. Usually there is a function to allow you to raise your hand, but it doesn't look like We
Maybe,
have that here.
Fatima,
Okay, so I'll just have to, oh, there it is. I see it. Somehow I'm missing it.
Fatima, people can also use the chat box. I'm monitoring that.
I see, okay, I see that, thank you. Thank you. Ask that you keep your comments and questions to please, because I want to allow everyone to speak. Thank you. Go ahead, Norman,
Having
please.
spent a lifetime working in the American Jewish community, I would have to say that I hope Mr. Ali is more representative of the Islamic community than I think Jerome Segal is of the Jewish community. His viewpoint is about as representative of the American Jewish community as Meritz's view is representative of the Israeli community. I'm sorry to say that because I wish his views were more like what the common view is in the American. Support a peace movement, I think, in the American Jewish community than he suggests. I pursued that issue, have pursued that issue for a good deal of my lifetime Jewish organizations. And while I won't say I was always on the losing side, by and large, I was usually on the losing side, and I never made I never found it possible to convert an organization which I worked toward my point of view.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can I? First of all, I agree with Norman's analysis that the majority of the Jewish community does not have the point of view that I share. However, if you look at the history of transformative systemic change, it's never been through the majority, it's been through an energized minority. The Martin Luther King Civil Rights Movement was not the majority, it was the minority. The universal health care movement, which ended in the passage of historical legislation, was an energized minority. The women's movement, the energized minority. The peace movement in Israel, Palestine, energized minority. We have to really look at the young people, Brother Norman, the young Jewish kids in universities across the country actually leading the BDS movements. So we can never give up hope. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But I want to thank you, Norman, because you helped lay the groundwork for people like myself and Waj and Fatima. So your contributions were not in vain. But we can't give up on love, and we can't give up on hope. We have to keep struggling.
May I chime in real quick? Just to give a perspective. And my request is for those of you who aren't speaking, do you mind going on mute just because it'll make it easier for everyone else to listen? Joel, you can stay on. It's okay, man. I think you've earned it. An honest conversation that we should have is the following. If you look at the data, both American Muslims, American Jews, the majority of them will favor a two-state solution, right? They want peace. If you look at the data, forget the headlines. Muslims and Jews have not been at each other's throats, from millennia. It's not that they inherit each other. This is just a lazy trope that has been advanced by people who don't want to actually do the work. It's quite the opposite, as you guys know, as students of history, that once there was the Inquisition, and the Crusades, that Jews oftentimes found shelter in Muslim majority countries. It wasn't perfect, but the whole concept of taqiyya, have you guys heard of taqiyya? Apparently Muslims do taqiyya. It sounds like a very delicious taco with extra salsa. But apparently taqiyya, which is another talking point that has been mainstreamed by the same incestuous Islamophobia industry, says that you can never trust a moderate Muslim. Even the moderate Muslims in America are scary. You know why? Because they're doing taqiyya. Their God commands them to secretly lie. And their real belief and their plot is to implement Sharia. Well, Muslims used to do taqiyya back in the day because you were housing Jews who were basically being, harassed. And they said, oh, no, this Jewish person, no, he's a Muslim. He's my family member. So that type of concept of taqiyya, even Maimonides, old Jewish scholar, allowed for preservation of community and life, right? So all I'm saying is that these tropes that Muslims and Jews hate each other is nonsense. If you look at the data in America, the community that actually mistrusts and loads Muslims the most, unfortunately, is white evangelical Christians. The favorability rate is like in the low 20%. The group that actually has the highest favorability rate of Muslims is Jews. Now it's a little bit above 50%, it's like 52, 53%, but hell, I'll take 52, 53%. It's a win. And if you said is we often unite around the shared values. We pro-immigrant, believe in climate change, right? Pro-Black Lives Matter. We want an expanded government to give more services. So there are a lot of wins here. The problems that exist have to be addressed is even though the majority of American Muslim American Jews, right, feel this way, are representative leadership, the gatekeepers, the organizations, the money, if we have to be honest, represent, not I would say the majority, but represent a gatekeeper status with a litmus test. And that litmus test always goes around Israel, Palestine, and now with BDS. So I, for one, I'll be completely transparent with you, am pro-BDS. I violated BDS to do a Muslim Leadership Initiative because of the academic boycott, but I'm not a card-carrying member of BDS, right? I didn't think it'd be that big of a deal that even though I'm for BDS and promote it, I'm not really a fan of the actual academic boycott. As a result of my violating the BDS, since I was somewhat of a high-profile Muslim, I've been told by the people actively boycotting me, they need my scalp. And the reason they need is they need to make an example out of me to show other people that you have to stay in line. Because if Wajahat Ali gets away, other people will get away. And it's a zero-sum game, and too much is at risk. So we need your scalp, even though we know you're not really a bad guy. We need to like behead you and put your head on a pike. When I talk to Jewish friends, they say pike, right? Because because the litmus test has to be created. So that's the main reason why people want to come after me and MLI is because we violated BDS. It's an absolutist zero-sum game. And I'll give you another example. Last week, Ali Abu Naim of Electronic Intifada did this article that tried to derail MGage. Now, what is MGage? MGage is a new organization, American Muslim political organization that seeks to bring about political advocacy and specifically getting out the vote and promoting American Muslim politicians. Why are they going after MGage? You cut out all the noise because of normalization and allegedly doing something with ADL, and some of their board members went on MLI. And so because of that kind of Glenn Beck chalkboard association, right? And that's a throwback if you guys remember the Glenn Beck Association. It's very similar to what people with Muslims. Every Muslim is a Muslim brother member because Wajahat Ali spoke at ISNA, and one time at ISNA he was a panel, and that panel member one time said this, and as such, it's 7 degrees, not of Kevin Bacon, but 7 degrees of the radical Muslim Brotherhood. It's the same type of inverse with it when it comes to normalization. And now MGage is being attacked because some people basically did MLI, right? But thankfully, kind of now you're seeing the tensions. There's a boycott. There's like a list of people sending the boycott, but now like today, Rashida Tlaib actually endorsed. People basically attack each other, and it's so self-destructive and painful to see because we're about 50 days away from the election, and you're seeing people attack each other essentially over, let's be honest, Joel, Israel, Palestine. And I'm sitting there thinking the reason I'm allowed, you could disagree with it, is because I realize the chaos Israel Palestine that we cannot escape has been imported and has kind of contaminated American Muslim and Jewish relations and inspired some of our worst angels, or rather I should say demons, to rise, where we're taking our eye away from the ball. This is not to say, I'm not saying don't care about Israel, Palestine, the occupation, whatever you believe in, 2-state, 1-state, BDS, but I'm saying is we have to articulate a more sophisticated language and relationship that we're able to talk about this, but at the same time realize as American Muslims, Jews, we're also dealing with white nationalism. We're dealing with Trump. We're dealing with the deep state QAnon conspiracy. We're dealing with literally white supremacists who come into our mosques and synagogues and kill us. And if we're going to kill each other and literally kill ourselves, our own organizations, for not being pure on this litmus test, we're dead. So I just had to acknowledge that right now because that is happening literally as we're speaking. We're seeing the fissures play out literally this week within the American Muslim community. I'm sure you're seeing it in the American Jewish community. I had to name it.
Wash, my attacks don't come from Muslims. My attacks don't come from Arabs. my attacks come from two different Jewish organizations. Will remain nameless. But here we're about to launch an unprecedented symposium where Arabs and Israelis and Palestinians who agree on a two-state solution and a path to peace. So I was attacked maliciously that I'm working with liberals in Israel. Why would Jewish progressives attack another Jewish progressive is beyond me. This goes deeper than religion. This also goes deeper into what I think is a failed American culture and the internet and computers. And there has to be what I call an end to LOL, lack of leadership. The other attacks that I get, and they're pretty bad. I go to Chabad. I remember I had made a presentation about why I was for a Palestinian state, why I believe that Islam was a religion of peace. And I walked into the temple, and most everyone is really cool, but the president of the temple would not say hello to me. And I said, well, why aren't you saying hello? And he walked away. I didn't care. I went to the front. I study the Torah. I believe in my religious principles. And I kept coming to temple. I wasn't scared off. And you know what? I'm embraced as someone who may disagree with a lot of the people in Chabad, and some of them do agree with me, but we can't be afraid to be true to who we are. We have to challenge people, even if they're of our own ilk, because if that's the truth and you're following God's path for peace and love, you got to, as Waj would say, you got to take those bows and arrows.
Yeah, you have to.
Can I say
I
that the
need
next
to,
three people,
we need to
Fatima?
move on. Dan, I can do,
You got the names? You got the names?
I'm moderating, okay. So, yeah, it looks like we have a couple of questions. Just want to take Margaret Johnson's question. I'm going to read it from the chat box. She's asking, can you comment on the Democratic strategy to early returns might show Trump winning, and then his supporters might not accept the final results?
The vote,
Who wants to take that question?
yeah, the vote that I am working on that on a national level and a state level. Vote by mail has been used successfully for decades. Even Trump voted by mail. The problem with vote by mail is that the head of the Postmaster General, DeJoy, decided unilaterally to destroy sorters. And where I live in Charlotte, they destroyed 7 sorters as a strategy to slow down vote by mail so that the absentee ballots would get in late. There was definitely a movement. There were all kinds of lawsuits. The jury went in front of Congress that we're doing until after the election. The reason why we have to vote by mail, there's 2 ways to do it. One is to do all souls to the polls. Take your absentee ballot and take it right to the Board of Elections or voting centers. That's the safest way to vote by mail. Number 2, what I'm working on in North Carolina with a very large coalition is Zuckerberg. Y'all know who Zuckerberg is, right? Facebook. He's giving $250 to Board of Elections to hire, it's basically poll workers, not poll monitors. The problem with vote by mail is if you don't hire enough people to count the absentee ballots. If we can take that, what happened in New York, they didn't have enough people to actually go over the absentee ballots. So there was a critical shortage of senior citizens who used to volunteer, but because of COVID-19, they didn't show up. So what we're working on is to make sure that Board of Elections hire enough people to count the mail. But like I said, there's 2 ways to do it. The safest way is just take that absentee ballot to your voting center or your Board of Elections. If you're going to vote by mail, just do it early.
And as Kay said, put your filled out ballots in a secure Dropbox before. 2 quick, and that's the second Margaret's question, or rather her assumption is an accurate one. People like us who tried the alarm, we were seen as crazy. Like I joked like I'm the brown Paul Revere, but instead of being celebrated, like he shot me. They're like, brown guy on the horse, kill him, or like brown Cassandra, right? And so many of us, especially students and experts on authoritarianism, have been warning that Trump will cheat. And I remember even in the mainstream media where I work last year, I tweeted this. Like a lot of folks said, you're crazy, you're reactionary, you're hysterical, he'll be fine. Lo and behold, like a bad James Bond villain, in the first act, he has literally revealed the plot and told you how he's going to cheat. And he was impeached, we forget, for abusing his power to cheat. So he's going to cheat. And in 2016, people forget, about 2 weeks before the election that he thought he was going to lose, he said the election is rigged. People forget that. For an election that he won, he still says, and he promotes the conspiracy theory that 3 million undocumented immigrants voted for him. For an election that he won. So I always tell people, that's what he says about an election that he won. What is he going to say about an election that he loses? He again said that the election is rigged if I don't win. He said it this week. He flirted with delaying the election. He again just this week, last week, flirted about staying on a third term. So what I want to prepare Americans for the following is this, that no matter what happens on November 3rd, the problem is going to be until January 20th. Those 2.5 months are going to be pivotal for our democracy, because it's not just the election and for all of us voting. And I have a small suggestion for everyone. It's what will Trump and Republicans in the entire conservative ecosystem, what will they do for those 2.5 months leading up to January 20th, which is the inaugural to leave. My prediction is that and I've said this openly on CNN, I say it on Twitter, is that Trumpism, like Joel said, will last Trump. The modern conservative movement belongs to Trumpism. They will further radicalize, and I said this few years ago, I'll say it again, they will weaponize, and some of them will become violent. If you think I'm being crazy, they've made Kyle Rittenhouse a murderer into a hero. He was a 17-year-old man who killed 2 people in Portland. They made broke-ass Bonnie and Clyde, the Portland couple who took out their guns, right, on peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters, the centerpiece of the RNC, where if you listen to their words, and I want everyone to go listen to their speech, it is a microcosm of white supremacy in all its spheres. The black and browns are going to attack the suburbs. It's literally Birth of a Nation remixed for 2020. You see him encouraging armed militias to shut down state houses. So what I'm telling you is that we're in a dark, deep time. Reject both sidesism. Do your best. If anyone says, they're the both, Biden and Trump are the both, we have to do our best to vocalize how they're not. A simplest way is Joe Biden believes in climate change. Donald Trump is not. On that alone, Donald Trump is an extremist. That's my simplest 20 seconds, right? And what we have to do, and I encourage everyone who feels overwhelmed, is to do the following, and I think this is how we win. Register to vote right now if you haven't. Secondly, every single family member, this is what you do, Excel sheet. Write down your family members in an Excel sheet, say, have they registered, and do a check. Call them up and say, have you registered? I did this for my mother-in-law in Florida. My mother-in-law in Florida hasn't voted ever in decades. She registered to vote, and she's getting her friends to register to vote. My aunt, who has never voted in this country for 40 years, is registering to vote. Do that, and then after you have checked that list, go to your small circle of close friends. If everyone just does this, you get out the vote, you win in the margins in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, potentially even Florida and Carolina. You wipe Trump out.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Fazia Dean. Her comment is, please comment on Jared Kushner's new message that his father-in-law, Trump, has brought peace to the Middle East. Does Kushner, being Jewish, give credibility to Trump's messages?
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Look, anytime there's peace between nations, that is a very good thing. However, anytime there's a peace deal in order to avoid the true most important peace deal, and that's between the Israeli government and the Palestinian people, that's not a good thing. Trump and Netanyahu are on the far right wing. Both support the settlement project. Netanyahu has never been serious about recognizing the Palestinians in terms of a people. His father was that way. He's had opportunity after opportunity to strike a peace deal with the very moderate Mahmoud Abbas and Erekat. He's refused to do so. He continues to build settlements, whether it's the West Bank or East Jerusalem. The Jewish community is so silent. It's too silent. I love J Street. I love J Street. J Street has to roar. American Jews have to go into the media, and they don't do it. I'm going to start doing it. Wash, if you want to help me get in the media, that'd be great.
I'll help.
Yeah, I'd like to get Kay, hi Kay, and all the other, millions of other Jews who don't believe in the right wing. But we got to speak loudly now and stop this right-wing movement in Israel. The real problem is very simple. Until Netanyahu is gone and Likud is gone, and they're replaced by a labor-led government that is serious about peace with the Palestinians, nothing is going to change. Don't cooperate with evil. Whether if you're Jewish and you say, "Oh, Netanyahu is Jewish and he's the prime minister of Israel and we got to back him because he's one of us," wrong. I am pro-Israel. I'm just anti-Netanyahu's policies.
Rod, do you want to answer
say
that
something?
question as well?
Fatima, you can go ahead. I mean, I think just for the interest of time, I think Joel said a lot. But I also remind people that David Friedman, the ambassador to Israel, is so extreme that he said that J Street are capos, Nazi collaborators. And he's so people forget that. I mean, there's so much chaos, right? We're bombarded with so much chaos that we just forgot it was 2 weeks ago where Trump mocked and ridiculed our veterans and said that they were suckers. And we just forgot that we heard the audio clip of the new Bob Woodward book where he lied about coronavirus and literally promoted falsehoods which result in people's death. People forget that David Friedman is so extreme that he's even to the right of Netanyahu. Pro-settlement against any two-state or even one state. One state, he wants river to the sea. And literally he calls fellow Jews J Street capos. So that's kind of where we're at with this Trump administration. I always tell Muslims, because you hear some Muslims who are so disaffected, they're both the same. And some Muslims, they're single issue voters, some Muslims, and their single issue is Palestine. And they say, what's the point? Democrats have failed Palestinians. Biden's going to fail Palestinians. I always tell them it's completely different because Trump's ploy on Israel is not for Jews. I always tell them this. And this is what happens when you don't engage or know other communities. I said, American Jews aren't dumb. They know that Trump isn't speaking to them when he's moving the embassy, that when he's inviting white evangelical preachers, Robert Jeffers, and the leader of Christians United for Israel, Pastor John Hagee, to give the invocations. Those are white evangelical pastors. This is all just for his white evangelical base. And it's important for a lot of voters, and I think a lot of Muslims, to know that this ploy is for his white evangelical base. And Joe Biden and the Democratic administration, yes, you can have your concerns with them, but they're nowhere near as right-wing when it comes to, or even right-wing when it comes to Trump and Israel. It's going to get so far worse. And at the very least, at least Joe Biden is against the settlements. At least he's against the settlements, guys. And so it's something you have to repeat to some Muslim voters who, unfortunately, it's so frustrating. When it comes to a single issue, Israel-Palestine, they give up and they wash their hands and they say, bah, they're both the same. They're not both the same at all. I will keep saying this again and again and again until I pass out. Fatima, take it away.
I see another question from Debbie Wines. Oh, I think before that, I think Charlotte, just I'll give you a minute to respond to, and then I'll take Debbie's question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You got to cut through some of this. I'm sorry. And look at the underlying cause of the Middle East conflict. It is oil. There has been divide and ever since 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, and it is culminating now in this phony peace deal. Let's look at who's involved. They're the oil monarchies. They've got all sorts of pipeline schemes. Israel wants to become an energy corridor along the whole Eastern Mediterranean. The UAE has pipeline deals that it wants to rejuvenate. So what I'm trying to say is that's another way to approach this so-called peace deal. It's all about money. It's all about oil. And it's hard for me to get it all in a minute. I've just written a book about this. My father was the first master spy in the Middle East. He was killed over the great game for oil. His mission was to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian pipeline that was going to terminate in either Palestine or Lebanon. And once I learned that, I began to understand the role of oil and pipelines in the entire conflict from World War I right up to now. And when I talk to audiences about this, and Jewish audiences, it's like, oh my God, it's like, well, anyway, scales dropping from the eyes. So
Okay.
thank you.
And we're going to have to take the next question. So Debbie Weinstein had a question. She's saying, I hear the and Debbie, if I don't, I see you've commented a couple of times. If I don't encapsulate the entire thought, please feel free to jump in after I read your question. I hear the Republicans are adding a universal / single payer to their initiatives. We know it's a ploy. Do you think they will have any success? Debbie, did you have anything to add to that?
I saw something last night. It was a line on CNN. I didn't hear anything. It just seemed to me like, oh, I could see them doing that. We know it's going to go nowhere, but we could see, you know, picking up some Bernie's people or, so I didn't know if it's something that you had any thoughts on.
The Republican Party has a universal health care plan, and that's for people to universally die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's just universally, just you don't have health insurance, die. You know, when I worked up there, I'd go in the elevators in the morning with these Republicans, and I felt like a coldness. I've never felt such coldness in my life. And they really are ideologically aligned with an idea that all government is bad. Anything that's government is just bad except for their salaries that they're on, and the police, fire, Social Security, Medicare that they are beneficiaries of. Remember that the Republican Party is the only party in the world that would like to eliminate government. I actually, to be honest with you, and Bruce Bussman and Win Bussins will tell you this, and so will Phyllis, who's on the call. I was the only staffer for 9 years that worked on universal health care. Many Democrats did not want to do it. Barack Obama was going to take it back, and we pressured him to make sure that we passed Obamacare. But I have never met a Republican serious about single payer, nor have I ever met a Republican that actually cared about whether or not you lived or you died because you were uninsured.
Can I just give you a story from a week ago that I thought was so stunning and kind of encapsulates the blasé attitude towards people who don't have health insurance and are dying right now. And more than 200,000 people have died. I know the official John Hopkins estimate puts about 192, 193,000, but most people have said that over 200,000 fellow Americans have died during this pandemic. Tom Tillis, your state, North Carolina, Senator, his staffer, just to give you an example, a woman who's been fighting and surviving cancer for years, called up a Tom Tillis staffer, and she said she's concerned because her husband got furloughed during the pandemic, so she was worried about insurance. And quote, she said, "You're saying that if you can't afford it, you don't get to have it, and that includes healthcare?" Staffer, yeah, just like if I want to go to the store and I buy a new dress shirt, if I can't afford that dress shirt, I don't get to get it. But healthcare is something that people need, especially if they have cancer, she said. Well, you got to find a way to get it. And I recommend everyone listen to the audio clip, because that's what we're dealing with. When people say both sides, I say, no matter how imperfect Biden is, do you want healthcare? Because Trump has openly said, literally, that they will repeal Obamacare, replace it with nothing. And Debbie, with your question, they tried that in 2018 during the midterm. Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, shamelessly, and all these elected Republican officials said, "Oh, we're for, protecting those with pre-existing medical condition." Then, literally, they lied. Literally, went on air and lied about this, as they have their history of voting against it. And it was their desperate ploy. And as you saw in 2018, it didn't work. And because they keep sticking their foot in their mouth, and because Donald Trump is on record literally saying he still wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, and he still hasn't magically come up with his Medicare a medical plan that was supposed to be released in August, right, Joel? It was supposed to come out in August, where he promised it. I don't think it's going to work. And Charlotte, to go to your point, again, I think it's important. for most American Jews, I can't speak for Joel knows, most American Muslims are not swayed by what's happening right now with the peace deal between Israel and UAE and Bahrain. News to me that they were at war. They realize that it's corrupt Arab monarchies who are throwing not only the Palestinians, but also Arabs under the bus for their economic advancement and also as a bulwark against Iran, to protect against Iran. So American Muslims and many Arab Americans realize it, and they have kind of said, rolling their eyes. And I don't think it's getting the type of play in America that Trump wants. It is getting the play with his base, and his base, it's not Jews, it's white evangelical Christians.
I got a question for Wajahat.
Yeah. What's up?
So when you're dealing with Hezbollah and Hamas,
I personally don't deal with them, but thank you for your
I'm
assumption.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Hey guys, I want
Go for
to
it.
hear Joel's response, but I also want to get to this next question before we go on to the next segment. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, the PLO used to tell me that I was too one-sided, which is interesting for the PLO to tell a Jewish guy that I was too one-sided in favor of the Palestinians. But in actuality, when rockets are shot from Gaza into Israel, when Hezbollah shoots rockets into Israel, that is not going to advance the peace process. And the more the so-called fake Muslim right attacks Israel, whether it's from underground tunnels, in Gaza, it's going to make it harder and harder for there to be peace, because the Jewish community is going to interpret that as a continuation of the Holocaust. And in my experience, when I used to help Hill staffers who were Muslim, I used to write press releases for them. And then people from various mosques in Northern Virginia, I used to write these press releases where the Muslim community was condemning all the violence. And they never got published in the newspapers, the Hill newspapers. They never got published in the New York Times, Washington Post. So it gives the impression to the Jewish community that all Palestinians and all Muslims are okay with violence against Israel. Can you comment on that?
Fatima, do you want to give the question first, or do you want me to comment on this? Or I could do both. You want to give your question, you want to recite the question that apparently that someone has, and I could tackle both? You're muted. I'm trying to read your lips.
Read my lips.
Apologies. I believe Moshe Chertoff has had his hand up for quite some time. So rather than look for his question in the chat box, I'm going to ask him to directly ask the question to you. Go ahead. Moshe.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. It's 3 a.m. here. I'm in the Western Galilee, not far from the mixed city of Akko. Mixed meaning of Jews and Arabs living together for quite a while. I wanted to offer you some perspectives and possibly some ammunition in fighting for a unified approach to the elections, so that we Jews and Muslims, Christians, and everybody who's represented in the Middle East here can get our people out, get the vote, and get this over with. Number one, back in I'm sure that everyone remembers when my prime minister came and took over the Congress and turned his speech to Congress into being the opening session for what I called, at the time I coined the name, the Likudnikan Party. It's the Likud and the Republicans together. They have the same sugar daddy. They have the same policies. They are living in that same universe, which is different from ours, I think. If everybody will just nod, I'll know you're in my universe. I think that they're living in a different universe. So number one, let's face it. What's going on today in Washington, or yesterday in Israeli time in Washington, is really a show. And I'm all in favor of peace, but we were never at war with the United Arab Emirates or with Bahrain. And we are still in conflict with the Palestinians. And here's something all of you should understand. To be truly pro-Israeli, you must also be truly Palestine. We're not leaving. They're not leaving. No one's going to end this in a military fashion. Therefore, both sides have to win for this to end. If one side wins, both sides lose. And therefore, we must, as Jews, support the ability of a Palestinian state, a free Palestinian state, to rise and be in cooperation with a safe and democratic Israel, which is not, I hope, will never be a Jewish state, but rather a homeland to the Jewish people, as Palestine will be a homeland to the Palestinian people, and that we must be a democratic state. I was an advisor to a Muslim member of Knesset, Zohair Bahalul, from the neighboring city in Akko. We see everything almost exactly the same. I was Bernie Sanders' leading supporter here in Israel. When Bernie would speak, I'd have to touch my lips to see that they're not moving. Bernie learned about his democratic socialism on a kibbutz. I'm a kibbutznik. In fact, I was on the same kibbutz where Bernie came to visit. I want you to know that I am anti-BDS, and I'd be happy to try to convince you. And I understand why people are BDS. I have a brother who's pro-BDS. But I want you to understand that we in Israel need American progressives to get behind Israeli progressives and Palestinian progressives. Because it's not like we're this, Norman was correct in his estimation, but if you noticed, we had 62 people ready to make a government after the third elections. But it got stolen under our feet by a general who was more a general than a politician or a statesman. And he stole the election and gave it to Netanyahu. And so don't agree with anybody that says the left is a very small minority. We're not. And we have the ability to take the next elections, and I'm working on it with people from the joint list, Muslim and Christian members of Knesset, to form one democratic party that will represent Jews and Arabs who are the alternative. And that's what you are in the United States. You are the alternative. So I continue, but I understand that we have to be short. Just let me mention the fact that I'm a member of Democrats Abroad, and we had the opportunity to actually influence something by changing the name from Democrats Abroad in Israel to Democrats Abroad in Israel and Palestinian territories. That was already a success. And we put together, those of us from the Meretz Party, put together a letter to the leaders of the Democratic Party to put into the Democratic platform for the election, make sure it gets to the DNC, that there's a statement against annexation. And we succeeded. There is now a mention against annexation in the Democratic platform, and also mentioning the need to support the rights of the Palestinians to their own homeland in a safe, okay, I'm done. Very good.
No,
Thank you, Moshe. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just mindful of time, and I see that a couple of other people have their hands up as well. What I'm going to do at this point is you will have a chance to speak. I'm just going to take the program to a different segment where I'm going to I'm going to allow the speakers to just sort of take a breather, and I'm going to just have the audience engage among themselves. You can take yourselves off of mute, and I will step in to moderate only if I see that people are not respectfully listening. And we're going to do this till about 8:15 or so, and then I'm going to bring the speakers back in, and then we can continue to the rest of the program. If it ends up, if we end up having more voices than time, I will allow it to go a few minutes over time if everyone is okay with that. So with that, I'm going to leave it to the audience to just sort of speak among themselves, and then, as I said, we'll bring the speakers back in and ask them to comment.
Abdul, I've seen your hands. Abdul, you want to start? Abdul? You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, Abdul, take yourself off mute.
I wanted to have a comment too, Fatima, Ramon.
Yeah,
Can
go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure. Essentially, that was, I had a question for Joel, but they are now sort of resting for a while, but I'll put this as a general question.
I'm
Just ask
okay.
the question and they can answer it later.
I'm
Sure,
more
sure,
than happy to
sure,
answer
sure.
it anytime.
This is a non-political question because, as Dan knows, I'm not into politics. And Joel said that he has studied the Quran, and he encouraged during his presentation the Jewish community to study Quran. I'm asking why not the other way around also? Why not Muslims read the Bible? I have read the Bible. I have read the Bible. I have read Ramayana and Mahabharata extensively and portions of Upanishads, which is the philosophical content of Hinduism. I think this is the best way to understand each other and get rid of some of the misgivings we have about each other's religion.
Great idea, Abdul. My question was to either Joel or
Excuse me, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Ramon. I was former Foreign Service officer in the U.S. and worked with the Middle East agendas. And my question was related to development assistance and security assistance. Whoever wins the election, it is very important that we present a united voice, both from the Jewish community and the Muslim community, to promote the idea of having more development assistance programs to help Palestinians with the COVID. I know Israel is going to go into the 3 weeks hiatus to lockdown, and the development assistance programs provide a way to help each other. And we should confront many people in the Foreign Service Office to promote the idea of cooperation across different faiths, communities of faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon.
I have a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's
This
that?
is Nagmana Malik. I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Nagmana.
Okay, so with Fatima, I have joined SOSS, which is a Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, a few years ago, and I'm very new to the issue, but very interested in it. And we are working very hard at our chapter to, provide dialogue. My quick question is, my personal experience from my chapter is that the Muslim side is less interested in a dialogue. I could be wrong, and I want to see what Joel or Wajahat has to say on that. Is that generally true or not? It is very difficult to find people to really come from the Muslim side. We have a lot of interest, which I have experienced from the Jewish side, to come in and have a dialogue. But from the Muslim side, it's always very flat. They're very disinterested, or they think that it's useless. I mean, they're very cordial and very, they're happy to have the cultural experience. But as far as a dialogue on very serious issues, Muslims generally seem to be very shy or disinterested, or maybe disappointed, maybe the word, and they do not come in. Is that a generally, is that true or not?
Thank you, Nagmana. I'm going to go to Walter Ruby, who wrote something very interesting in the chat box. I'm going to ask Walter to, if he could go ahead and read that himself, please.
Thank you, Fatima. So my question, I'm not reading it, but I'll try to say it, is that David Brooks wrote a very strong piece in the New York Times, interesting for someone who was a Republican neoconservative, saying essentially, not only do we need a plan to vote, to vote early or however we do it, but we're also going to need, everyone shouldn't have a plan for post-November 3rd when, if and when, but probably when, tragically, Trump initiates the scenario that Wajahat laid out for us. So the Trump people seem to be planning, but what is happening on our side? Because obviously it would be much better to have plans, in groups like this than each of us individually trying to figure that out. And I think the other important thing that David wrote was that it's not just going to be a question of, going out for a Women's March, even if you have huge numbers. It's going to have to be, I think, sustained and very strong to have a chance to fight, concentrated state power. So I'm just interested. I'd love to hear from Waj and others what what they think, you know, we should be
Walter,
doing. It's a very, very dire
I just want to
situation.
tell you that I am one of the persons nationally that is
Joel,
heading up that.
Joel,
Oh,
you gotta, this is just the audience right? Enthusiasm. We'll pull you back in a minute.
I'm good.
I just want to take a question. No problem. I'm going to take a question from Kay. Kay, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. Well, it may not be that relevant anymore. It was a comment on BDS, just to say that BDS, you know, people have been asking, or there used to be all these editorials.
AirPods off. It's very interesting. You should
I'm
see it, but it's the same old.
Excuse me, am I speaking or is someone else speaking?
Yeah, Nagmana, you've got to allow her to speak, and then you can respond, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah. No. So people used to, the Jewish community used to continue, and still says, "Oh, you know, I'm pro BDS." So let me just out myself and say that as a Jew, I am pro BDS because I think Palestinian civil society, which initiated BDS in 2005, I believe, they have a right to use the same type of economic pressure that has been used as part of peaceful movements for change for decades. It was used against South African apartheid, and it was used in other cases. It's being used to, you know, for companies to divest from the fossil fuel industry, et cetera. And so there has been a lot in the Jewish press. Where is the peaceful Palestinian movement? Where is the Palestinian Gandhi? Well, BDS is a peaceful Palestinian movement. And now BDS gets demonized, it's taboo, it's beyond the pale. So that was a comment that I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you, Kay. And then I'm going to take Dan Spiro's comment. Go ahead, Dan.
So first of all, I think we've been doing this for what, an hour plus? And every voice I've heard has been on the left. And those of you who know me know that even more important than politics for me is the process of this organization and making sure that this is a home for all concerned, right? For all Jews, all Muslims, and all allies. So you are forcing me to put on my non-left hat. And I say that as someone who in 1 week was accused on Facebook of being both someone who believes only in the Palestinian narrative and someone who is progressive but for Israel, which I can't be both. Anyway, so I wanted to speak a little bit about this peace agreement or reconciliation agreement that I've seen nothing but negative said about it on this call, or heard nothing but negative said about it. And I will tell you that this is going to play really well for Donald Trump because it played really well for me. And I say that as somebody who deeply opposes Netanyahu, and to Waja's point about Biden being anti-settlement, it's not enough to be anti-settlement, you have to be pro-pressure on Israel, or else you're not anti-settlement. So I am the last person who should be giving right-wing sound bites. But I will say that to see on Fox News, because it was the only one that covered it during my lunchtime, Trump in a room with the UAE person, the prime minister, the leader, talk about a warm peace with Israel. It just made me feel so good to think about Arab nations contemplating a warm peace with Israel. It's what we've done in JID since 2009. It's called real dialogue. It's called actually engaging people as cousins, as family members, not some sort of cold peace where the people on the streets hate one another, but we're not killing one another. That's not good enough for me. I don't see the trope that this is not going to save everything for the Palestinians. This is not going to make peace for the Palestinians. Well, let me tell you this. If we stopped racism tomorrow in this country, it wouldn't solve the climate change problem. That doesn't mean it's not a good thing. And the idea that we should be constantly talking about total peace and rolling that boulder up the hill and never getting anywhere until we get to the top, only to go way back to the bottom again because we don't get all the way. That hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in 72 years. So the idea of actually making positive contributions speaks to me. Just like Kay said about BDS being peaceful, I obviously oppose BDS. This is peaceful. So when I feel really warm about this peace agreement, you can imagine what people all over Florida, Jewish people all over Florida are thinking. And when they see CNN not covering it, they're not saying this is not getting much play. They're saying media bias. And Donald Trump is plenty bad enough. He doesn't need media bias to make him look better. So all I can say is there are two sides to these issues, but most importantly, I agree with what the panelists have said, and I will be involved in Joel's peace initiative, that we just need to be talking respectfully, and when we disagree and we can love each other, that's where the real work starts. That's the good stuff. Because anybody can preach to the damn choir, and there's been too much choir preaching tonight. And so I just want to say, I love Kay. She's pro BDS. We've known that. We've debated each other. It doesn't stop anything about our relationship. And I hope you all have an open mind about people with different points of view, because that's the really good stuff. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Dan. That was very, very meaningful. And, with respect to respect, I think you said it. You said it. I mean, nothing further needs to be said. With that, I'm going to take a question from Gary, who's been waiting very patiently. Gary, go ahead, please. Or Gary, are you on mute?
Hopefully not now.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I just had a comment. All of this dialogue is great, and I've been with on and off doing things with JIDS for 10 years, and it's terrific to have a dialogue like this, but just wanted to let people know who might not be aware that starting shortly after the last election in 2016, we have started a group, Jamaat, Jews and Muslims and allies acting together, who are actually trying to do something about all the issues. We have gotten very much involved in the election over the last month and a half, and we are trying to pursue every possible strategy that we can, including the one that Waj mentioned is one that we know an organization at Move On. They're doing a great program, Mobilize to Win, to get people to get their family and friends and networks in an organized manner, but are also working on things like phone banking and texting and writing letters. And anyone who is interested, I'll just put it in the chat. We will continue to talk to people about, what kind of things that you're doing, if they work or they don't work. We'll have some ideas and hope to get as many of you involved as we can. The one other thing I just want to mention is in response to Walter's comment about, the post 9/11/3 apocalypse, what are we going to do about it? One very interesting thing I just discovered last night is that there is a Facebook group that has been mushrooming called Lawyers for Biden-Harris. It now has over 7,000 members, and they are going to be doing all sorts of stuff in terms of monitoring the polls and taking legal action after the election if need be. And there is a huge group of lawyers who are now mobilizing to do that, so that this won't be on the streets, whatever happens.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. Did you leave a way for everybody to get in touch with you? Maybe leave an email in the chat box. So
I just put on the email address for the main address for Jamaat to get onto the our mailing list.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for making that announcement, because it really, I'd like everybody who is interested to get involved, in the spirit of this conversation. I think there will be, I suspect there will be quite a bit of interest. So thank you again. I noticed that it's 8:20 right now. Our conversation is supposed to end at 8:30. And once again, I have mismanaged the time. I hope it's been enjoyable for everybody, but here's what I'm going to suggest. If you guys are okay with this, and if you can stick around till 8:45, I would like to properly round out the discussion with the next segment, which is going to entail bringing our illustrative speakers back into the conversation, and just sort of asking them to react to what they heard. And it doesn't preclude the audience from asking further questions. I noticed that there are quite a few questions in the chat box that remained unanswered, and I would, ideally like to have everyone's questions answered. So we'll do our best towards that end. Is that okay with everyone? Before I do that, I just want to make sure I get a sort of a sense of what everybody is thinking. Is that good?
Yes.
Put your hands up if yes. Just say, I'm going to put my hand up. Guys are good with that? Okay, good. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the speakers to give their, excuse me, to give their reactions to what they heard from the audience. Go at it, guys.
Waja, go ahead. You start.
I'm just for sake of time and efficiency, I'm just gonna try to answer them all at once, which I think will be doable. Just give me 3 minutes, and hopefully I'll be able to take care of it. I mean, in answer to what Joel's question about the perception that some Jews have about Muslims, I've gone to Israel, Palestine 3 times in the past 7 years. I have met settlers. I've interviewed settlers. I have met the Jewish left in Israel. I have met scholars. I have met those people who are against 2 states, pro 1 state. I've met Druze. I've met Palestinian Christians. I've met Palestinians who want 2 state, 1 state. I've met some Palestinians who probably, I would say, are extremists. I've gone to refugee camps, and I could tell you that I did MLI, Muslim Leadership Initiative, not because I thought I could bring a 2-state solution or a 1-state solution, because why would anyone listen to me, right? I went to learn about how Jews discuss and debate these issues, about Judaism, Jews, Israel, and Zionism, and to become informed as to how these narratives are lived and play out in the communities. So, like example, just because you take Islam doesn't mean you become Muslim. Just because you study world religions in college doesn't mean all of a sudden you're a Buddhist or a Hindu. But it is good to inform yourself about the nuances of voices that exist. And so just because I don't agree with a lot of the politics of some of the people in Shalom Hartman Institute, I understand as a result of spending time why Israel is important to them. Does that make sense? I understand why they get triggered by BDS or why they get triggered by 1 state. I don't agree with it, but I'm forced to deal with their voices and our friendships when I'm articulating my thoughts. I cannot simply essentialize them as a villain or as the other. I can tell you that I can close my eyes and predict the first 7 questions that will be asked of me when I go to many American Jewish synagogues or organizations. Do you condemn Hamas? Do Muslims condemn Hezbollah? Do Muslims condemn Al-Qaeda? Are you guys anti-Semitic? Why do you guys care about Israel? Why do you guys oppress your women? It's just so boring. I don't even get offended anymore. And I remember I don't even get offended. I just laugh. I just sit there and go, let me guess, your first 3 questions were Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, anti-Semitism, why do I care about Israel and about women? And they're like, United States about 3 years ago in New York, Shalom Hartman had me talk to like a lot of their funders and board members, highly educated, successful American Jews. I'm not talking about like agents. I'm talking about like, this is my literary agency. I did this whole spiel. We had 2 hours, and in the Q&A, they asked me these essentialized, reductive questions to the point where a member from Shalom Hartman Institute was like apologizing, but then he said, you know where some of my community members are. This is where they are. And the problem is with Muslims is that we've been playing the condemn-a-thon for 20 years. And as Kay said, prove to me there's a moderate Palestinian. Prove to me there's a moderate Muslim. I'll give an analogy that some people might not like. People of color and black people in particular in this country have had to play that game forever. Right? And it's come to a point now where we're saying, what work have you done? Because I need a good faith partner. I'm exposing myself and putting my hand out, and you can't even just Google Muslims condemn terrorism, right? And it comes to a point when you're in power, power is often blind to its own privilege and abuses of those power. And I remember when I've gone to Israel, Palestine 3 times as an American and as a American Muslim of Pakistani descent, in certain sections of Israel, they literally thought I was Arab, and I got treated like an Arab. In certain sections of Israel, they thought I was a Sephardic Jew, and I got treated like a Sephardic Jew. It's hilarious. Like literally, I went to the in Jerusalem, the old train station that has been converted into a new center for those of you who have gone. And I was with Segal Hartman Institute faculty members, and there were Jews. I just happened to be was crowded, and literally got hit on by an American Jewish woman who had moved there. And I'm like, is this woman hitting on me? And Marcy said, put on a kippah and they think you're a Yemeni. You look like us. I literally walked down the street with 2 hijabi American Muslim women, and we got spit at and cursed at, okay? So that just goes to show you the problem that exists. And it shows you the perspective of Palestinians also, and many Muslims, that they're saying that the boot is on the neck of Palestinians, and Israelis are asking the victims to prove their humanity repeatedly. And I was told by a settler when I interviewed them, once you guys prove, and I'm not even a Palestinian, but once you become essentialized, once you all prove that you are worthy of democracy and that you are peaceful, then we'll consider giving it to you, which is the talk of colonialism, right? And so I'm just throwing that out there, is that from the perspective of many American Muslims and Palestinians, that's the perspective, is that the boot is on their neck and you have both sides, something which is not both sides. And I could tell you that Muslim has become conflated with Arab, which has been conflated with Palestinians, which has been conflated with Hezbollah, among some of the most intelligent, otherwise intelligent American Jewry, that I was like slightly disappointed that I got confronted with this. And to the point where when I went and first gave that lecture to Segal Hartman Institute, these are the leading scholars. The first comment I got was the following: I didn't know American Muslims could be funny, which I thought it was very funny. So we're dealing with that. I agree with, I think it was Dan, that there is a positive when it comes to Bahrain and UAE normalizing relations. That could be positive, right? My critique is when it comes to those saying that this will help the peace deal. It's not the Arab nation states as throwing them under the bus. When it comes to BDS, and it comes to my first point, you have to realize when it comes to these stereotypes of where is the moderate Palestinian, where is the moderate Arab, where is the moderate Muslim, and they lump us all together. When you present them with BDS and you see such a violent stamping out of BDS, it's similar to what happened with Colin Kaepernick, right? You can't even allow a black man to good enough. So basically, what you're saying is, we can't fight, we get it. We can't, launch rockets, we get it. We can't even peacefully condemn. We can't even boycott that was done against South Africa. So what you're telling us is to die, be occupied, take it. And you might not agree with this, but I'm just telling you how this plays out. And so what I tell people is, even though I support BDS, but obviously I'm not like a card-carrying member and absolutist about it, American Jews have to contend with the fact that and I'm glad Joel said it, it's Jews who are now leading the BDS movement. And it's Jews, I think, who have to do a lot of the heavy lifting with American Jewry when it comes to saying my relationship with Zionism and Israel is coming up against my deep liberalism and Judaism and faith in human rights. And there's only so much work that we can do as allies, just like there's only so much work people of color can do in confronting white supremacy. But apparently it's up to the whites in America to also confront this. And this might be hitting people really hard right now. I'm not meant to, I'm just found out that many of the funders of the Islamophobia industry were Jewish. I can tell you how that landed on Muslim ears. They're like, of all people, Jews in America should know what it's like to be the other. of all people, this is what happened against you. And we want to emulate Jewish success. Because when you see Judaism, and it's right, Moshe, not one Zionism, not one Islam. I agree with you. I study this. A lot of people don't. They essentialize. My group, my tribe essentializes Jews and Zionism also. Is the problem, which is why they need to talk to people like Moshe and others. You might not agree, but you need to see the nuance. But when Muslims saw the Jewish footprint in Islamophobia, this is the impression. This might hurt Jews listening to this. Wherever there's a rising American Islam, whenever there is Muslims in America who are succeeding in politics and culture, there's always a Jewish footprint there to stamp it out. That's the impression. And the reason always is for Israel-Palestine. And so that is something that's really painful to my Jewish allies when they hear that. But that's when we will be within Judaism. Just like it's so important for Jews to hear Muslims openly speak out against anti-Semitism. Right. And so I say this in relation to what everyone's saying, and I hope this was helpful, but I need more Jewish allies, just like I need more Muslims to step out from the absolute zero-sum game and allow themselves to be a dark knight. And the final thing I'll say, according to, I think it was Tamina or someone else who asked about Muslims, so the Sister of Shalom, it's right. There are more Jewish allies and more Jews who show up than Muslims. And that is an endearing problem. And the problem is because of the normalization against anyone who's a Zionist and calling them out and icing them out. That's what happened to me. And this is a struggle that we're dealing with, because the people like me who do this, I will be iced out further for doing this work, because I'm sure Moshe is Zionist, I'm sure someone else is Zionist, and I'm sure they'll find a 1 degree of separation. And because of the hardline BDS, I have now broken BDS by normalizing with someone who's Zionist. And as such, not only that, I made that point, and the final thing I say, I'm so sorry for talking about this so long. I hope this is helpful. They're icing out fellow Muslims who are doing work because you're not pure enough. No one's pure enough. I personally think this is disaster for American Islam. I think it's disaster for Muslims. I think it's disaster for Muslim Jews. I don't think it will lead to peace, but some people disagree with me. And so at that point of Jews feeling frustrated with not enough Muslims stepping up, you have every right to be frustrated, but I'm explaining to you why there's that pushback. And whenever some Muslims do step up, the cacophony of boycotts or Facebook likes or posts or tweets is so loud that people say, shit, man, pardon my language, I can't take this anymore. I can't take it. And so it's a silencing. So that's why I keep trying to do it, because I'm so marginalized now in some of these communities that they call me and say, Waj, you can say things I can't say. You go do it. I need more of these people on both sides to emerge. I'm done. I'm so sorry I spoke for so long. Thank you guys for having me. This was wonderful. I appreciate this dialogue. I appreciate you guys doing this. And you have my prayers and my goodwill. And take it away.
Thank you, Waj. Yeah, go ahead. By the way, I'm just mindful of time. It's 8:33 right now, and I want to take a few other people's questions. Looks like it may go to 9 o'clock, but after it's going to turn into a pumpkin. So that is the absolute, that is the absolute deadline, just so you guys know. If anybody wants to stick around, I want to do that. But I also want to give Joel
and Fatima, I'm so sorry, even though I'm the one who spoke so long, my wife is staring at me with 3 kids. I might have 5 minutes of equity left before my wife divorces me. So if I leave in 5 minutes, I hope you guys aren't offended. Please forgive me.
No worries. Thank you so much for your contribution, and I think everyone else appreciates it too.
Can I just say, as the president of this organization, we would love to have you speak again, even though you went to Berkeley. That was deeply painful. I can handle the BDS. The Berkeley thing is difficult.
Go Bears.
Go Cardinal.
All right, Joel, the floor is all yours.
Waj, I thought you spoke beautifully, and I did not think that you spoke too long. I thought everything you said was very important. One thing I'm just going to share 2 perspectives. One is I want to challenge everyone. I don't think that the word Zionist should be used, and I'll tell you why. If you ask a Jewish person what is Zionist, they don't know. That's number one. Number 2, I think it was in the 70s, there was a debate in the United Nations where the vote was Zionism equals racism. It was very painful to the Jewish community. I think it should just be eliminated from well, who am I to say it should be eliminated? I think that it causes too much confusion among those of us who believe in, you know, peace and justice. That's number one. Number two, I spent 30 years in government. I was a political science major in UNC Chapel Hill. I went to law school and I studied conflict resolution. I've been trained as a political scientist and also as a professor of political science to solve problems. I don't think that this is a problem that is so intractable that it cannot be solved. It cannot be solved by Waj alone, trying to, you know, show this progressive, very moderate face of Islam. He can't do it by himself. If anything, I would say there must be a Jewish, Muslim, Christian interfaith coalition. That's exactly what Moshe Chertoff said, that helps empower the voices of the progressives in Israel and Palestine that have a hard time speaking. As I said earlier, if you're a professor in Israel and you talk about Geneva Accord, you can get fired. If you're a Muslim in Jerusalem and you talk about peace with Israel, you can have your car booby-trapped and your son beat up. So the third point I wanted to make is we're often frozen out by this debate between Israel and Palestine. I would posit something different. We're just trying to do something that's been done for thousands of years, and that's make peace. In the and I'm not an expert on the Quran, but in the Quran, it does say that if anyone apologizes to a Muslim, and if it's genuine and sincere, you must accept the apology. In the Torah, it says you have to apologize 999 times for peace. I really feel strongly that unless there is a civil society movement that demands the beginning of peace talks from the Israelis and the Palestinians, nothing's going to change. Point two, unless the American Jewish community demands an end to the occupation, an end to the way Arabs and Muslims are treated as second-class citizens in Israel, it's going to be very, very difficult for there to be peace. This is something that it can't be shoved under the rug anymore, whether it's in Jewish Muslim dialogues. It has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with professionally, has to be dealt with honestly. It is not beneath any Jewish person to apologize for the Nakba. It is not beneath any Jewish person to apologize for the occupation. Occupations don't work. Every time throughout history, whether it was in Northern Ireland, whether it was the British occupation of America, whether it was, you know, the British occupation of Northern Ireland, occupations result in two things: violence or peaceful resistance. Until the Jewish community realizes that we cannot occupy the Palestinians, there's going to be friction between Muslims and Jews forever. I've heard this from every Muslim that I've ever encountered. Every Muslim I've ever talked to has said the same thing. Let's not fear discussing how to end the occupation. Let's embrace the idea of those of us who want to see a just, I would say, a two-state solution. Moshe, I think, is someone who can really talk about this more. I have not met a Palestinian leader, and I've worked with the PLO, with the PA at the highest levels, who are for a one-state solution. Most of them say that they're for a two-state solution at first, because that's the only thing the Knesset will agree on, and that most Palestinians do not want to live with their oppressors. Most Palestinians do not want to go back to Israel because they won't feel that comfortable there. I think, if anything, I think a starting point is a two-state solution with 67 borders of the Geneva Accord. But I'll just emphasize this. Let's not use the word Zionist, but let's use the word a negotiated permanent Middle East peace settlement, not just between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but in Israel, the Palestinians, and the entire Muslim world and the rest of the Arab world.
Hey, thank you, Joel. Waj, did you?
I have to leave because my poor wife has 3 kids on her head. But please forgive me, or else my wife. I told her what she was doing. She goes, fine, I'll give you 2 hours, because she believed in it. But or else I would have stayed. It's only because a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 10-month-old. So I hope you guys, please pardon me, or else I would have stayed. I wanted to respect Joel and stay for the end of his time. And thank you guys so much for this organization. And thank you to Fatima for reaching out several months ago. I appreciate you guys spending the time. It's very rare to get 60 to 70 people to stay for 2 hours on a call. It means people care. It's quality over quantity, even the quantity. I mean, to get that many people. And the final thing I'll say is, please vote. Don't be apathetic. Our faith encourages us to have hope. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. Cynicism is cheap and lazy. And if Muslims and Jews start giving up hope, then it's going to be bad for everyone else. So have hope and vote. And inshallah, let's have some good news November 4th.
Nice to meet you, Waj. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to allow people that have not yet had a chance to ask questions to ask them. Unfortunately, Wash has had to leave, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to engage. So please, I think Debbie, did you? I can't. Somebody tried to ask a question. Who was that?
I think Nasli is asking a question, but she's on mute.
Nasli, was that you? Do you want to take yourself off mute? Let me see if I can take you off mute.
I can get off mute, but I didn't have a question.
Oh, I saw your. I thought you were asking a question.
Somebody had a question, and I just.
I'm going to comment back to.
Okay.
But it wasn't a question. But okay. I put it on there. Just at how sisters, we're not supposed to engage in difficult issues until we've developed a 2-year plus relationship with each other.
Yeah, by contrast, this organization started arguing almost immediately. And I think it was our 3rd meeting where the local imam, who was a convert, said that if you're not a Muslim, you're going to go to hell. And when I told that to a fellow imam, he said, that's why we tell converts you're not supposed to talk for 10 years. Anyway, unfortunately, we lost a lot of people at the meeting, but we're still going strong. That was early 2009. So we've been fighting with each other ever since.
At our chapter in the SOSS, and this is Nagmana Malik speaking. So we have passed 2 years, and we have very thoughtfully prepared our group for these issues, and we are just starting it. We did start with the last meeting was to talk about the agreement, and we for example saw one movie, and we talked about both sides and very, very sensitive issues, and we are doing very, very well because we are a small group of 16 and 17. We prepared 2 years to bond together as friends. We are very close. And now when it comes to these sensitive issues about Palestine, it is hard. It is hard for everybody to even talk about 2 years where you are very, very close friends even now. But it is a great, great experience to get to know about the issue and to really understand its complexities. And it's an ongoing process. So it's a wonderful thing, the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom.
Thank you, Nagmana. I would echo Nagmana's comments. Being a former co-lead and actually co-founder of the Arlington, Virginia chapter of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom for 2.5 years. So,
Fatima,
yes.
as a person who's not allowed to join the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, can I suggest to those of you who are here that we did one joint JIDS SOSS event a couple of years ago? Be happy to do another one. If you all want to,
yes,
talk about a topic, let's do that again.
Yeah. Yes, sure. Can I have your contact, or Fatima would probably have.
Fatima, we'll give it to you.
Okay, that's a great
idea. Just 1 minute. I want to just plug in one thing. We as a chapter have prepared one letter about showing our this is like a generic letter that we have prepared to send to all our local senators and whoever wants to do that. We have that available, which talks about the recent agreement and how we as Jewish and Muslim Americans want the Israeli government to also obey by its promises and not to back off on it. So
Thank you, Nagmana. I just want to make sure I've seen, I think Ziad had a, I'm sure I probably missed a lot of other people, but I've seen Ziad ask, making a lot of comments, and I didn't know if he wanted to take himself off of mute and ask, or make any comments or ask any questions. Ziad, would you like to, do you have to share?
Well, I don't have my video on, but my only question was, I listened to this amazing meeting and I thought about some very interesting things. And one of them was a podcast I listened to from a lady who's a very controversial journalist in Israel who came there with her family as a child from Argentina. Mentioned in this podcast something that I think it goes beyond even the Israel-Palestine issue, but it's a worldwide general thought. But she said that 70% of Israelis want peace, 70% of Palestinians want peace, and it's a passive majority being controlled by an active minority. So I think that was really the crux of my question to Joel and to Wajahat, was to see what their thoughts were on how to engage the passive majority where the real power is to make change.
Well, thank you, Ziad. I want to say that Ziad Rabia is not only one of the greatest jazz saxophone players in North Carolina, but in the nation, but his father is a legendary Palestinian poet. Wow. So yeah, the statistics have shown that 70% of those polled in the United States are for a two-state solution. Those polled in Palestine for a two-state solution. According to Moshe Chertoff, those statistics, at least in Israel, is starting to get reduced. I think, though, that I really haven't met anyone yet in the Jewish community, including when I've had very difficult discussions with AIPAC donors. Once I explained the Geneva Accord and how a peace agreement with Israel and the Palestinians would make Israel safer, and they see the logic of it. And I'll just give you an example. I'm not going to get too policy wonk on everybody, but if there's a two-state solution, there's a negotiated peace settlement. This is what I would tell them. If you had U.S. troops between Israel and Palestine, I doubt that anyone would attack the United States. That's number one. Number two, if the tunnels below Gaza were blown up and it was a demilitarized state except the police, I really think it'd be very hard to be any attacks from Gaza. If there was a trade zone between the Israelis and the Palestinians, it's supposed to be an $8 billion trade zone, $8 billion, because that's the sale of olives, soaps, etc., which was what was going on pre-1948. If there was a Marshall Plan of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the majority of people who are unemployed in those areas were working, I really don't think, and there was no occupation, I don't think that there would be a reason for Palestinians to feel so frustrated that they'd want to use either violence or peaceful civil disobedience if they had their dignity and their respect. And even the people from AIPAC who were yelling and screaming at me before I could eat my matzo ball soup, they were kicking my butt even before the first matzo ball went down my throat, at the end of the evening agreed with what I had to say. I really think there has to be a much deeper dive in these peace agreements. The Geneva Accord, which is one of the most brilliant peace agreements I've ever seen, guess what? The majority of Israelis have never heard of the Geneva Accord, and Moshe will explain to you why, because he was part of the Geneva Accord. It's because there was never a campaign to explain it. There's never been a campaign to explain the Geneva Accord or the Israeli Peace Initiative to Americans. I think there needs to be a new organization established that is Arab or Muslim and Jewish, where we agree on the same solution, and it needs as much money as Greenpeace, and we have to start teaching people why peace is more advantageous than a perpetual war that's killing everybody. And that's not going to happen until groups like this make that happen. That's what I think is missing. I do not see a serious peace, two-state solution, whatever, one-state solution movement that with funding, organizers, seminars, briefings, whatever, that's what I think has to happen.
Okay, thank you, Joel. And I see that, I think Manaima, did you have your hand up? Would you like to make a comment or did you have a question?
I did have a question.
Manaima is another one of my sisters in the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, but in a different chapter. Go ahead, Manaima.
Mute myself.
You're unmuted.
Okay, very good. I already tried to get this answer from Moshe, and he did respond to me, but everything went so fast I didn't get the complete answer. I asked for the name of the town where Muslims and Jews live together. I wanted to know in Israel what the name of that town was. And he did respond, but it went so fast before I knew it, I didn't get down the name of the town.
Oh gosh, is Moshe
It's
Neve Shalom.
No, it was Akko.
Akko, yeah.
It started with
Akko,
AKKO.
Akko.
Was that that's the entire name, AKKO?
Or it depends how you spell it.
ACRE and AKKO.
Yeah, it depends on if you're Jewish or Palestinian or, yeah.
Also
it's
known as
also
Akko.
political how you spell it.
Okay.
But it could be AKKO or ACRE. It could be many different ways. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Maybe we can take a trip there.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's the most gorgeous place. I visited it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Actually, there are a lot of towns where both people are living together peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't get much publicity.
Can I point out that whether it's two states or one state, these people are going to have to get along? I mean, that's the foundation of all of it.
Joel Segal is tapping me, the speaker.
Okay, guys. You know, I'm just looking at the time here, and I'm just, first of all, I'm just amazed that you guys, at everything I've heard, and also grateful that this number of people have actually stayed on as long as they have, because it means they care. And so I just want to extend my gratitude to all of you who have stayed on the call. That having been said, like I said, we've got 7.5 minutes before we turn into a pumpkin. So I can take maybe one more question or comment, and then we got to get out of here. Going once, going twice.
I have a quick question. I just wrote one to Joel as well. I just was reading one of the
Joel
research.
wants to work with me.
Okay. Nazi, are you speaking, or should I speak? Okay, so well, I just wrote the question for Joel. One of the things, the discussions that come up when we are talking about these sensitive issues is the very concept of this Jewish lobby, which affects controls the politicians, and that the media is owned by the Jewish, and that there is a lot of donations through the philanthropy to spread Islamophobia. And most of our sisters within the chapters think that these are just myths, but this report on CARE, which is the Council of American Islamic Relationships, what is your take on that?
That's a great question. When I was in the Congress, even Mr. Conyers, who was one of the most progressive Black members of Congress in the history of Congress, when the PLO ambassador, Ericot, would try to meet with Mr. Conyers, the staff would block Ericot from meeting with Mr. Conyers. How can the PLO ambassador make the case for a two-state solution or peace when the staff blocked the ambassador? This happened all through the 13 years that I was there. Now, why did that happen? That happened because the staff were worried that if the member of Congress met with the PLO ambassador, that AIPAC would raise money and raise hell and get rid of the member, and then they would be out of a job. I am sorry, but that is called evil. That's not democracy. That's point one. Point two, in my opinion, AIPAC spreads misinformation about the Palestinians and makes them into the permanent boogeyman because they drive big fancy cars, they live in gigantic houses in Silver Spring and Bethesda, and they want to keep that job. And the reason why AIPAC is the most dangerous organization, at least in the Jewish community, is because I call them the tip of the spear of the manipulatocracy. When I meet with the grassroots who go to AIPAC conferences, I don't find them to be so intransigent and right-wing as AIPAC National. That is why the progressive voice of the Jewish community is going to have to call out AIPAC for being the single biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East. Number two, in terms of CARE, I know the directors of CARE, they're very close friends of mine. I don't know what to say because there's two different narratives. One narrative is that CARE funnels money to Hamas and extremists. And then when I speak to the executive director, he's saying, look, that's not true at all. We're being set up. So, you know, it's hard to say. I will say this, if we end the occupation of Palestine and we end the embargo on the Gaza Strip and have a negotiated permanent settlement, we won't even be having this discussion anymore. Thirdly, donations to radical right groups, be they Palestinian or Israel, will dry up because there won't be a reason to fight anymore because there'll be nothing left to fight over. A lot of the funding that is going to the Jewish right and then the Palestinian right is only because of the occupation. The question I would ask everybody that's listening, where are the Jewish voices? Where are the Jewish members of Congress? Where are the Jewish celebrities? Where are the Jewish business leaders? And why aren't they speaking loudly for peace and against the occupation, against the expansion of settlements? Unless the Jewish community starts speaking up, nothing is going to change. Furthermore, it is Jewish money from America, which is also a contributing reason for this problem. And another thing about the settlements that people need to understand, a lot of the settlement expansion is not due necessarily to ideology. It's campaign contributions that are coming from the developers going into the coffers of these political campaigns because they need to get reelected. We're not looking at the capitalist motive either in all this. But I posit that if what Dan has put together here and Fatima and others, I would really challenge you to consider having a conversation about making a stronger case about the need for a negotiated peace settlement and to push back against the settlers. And whether you're on the right wing in Palestine, whether it's pushing back against violence against the Israelis, it all is bad. Whether it's rocket attacks against Israel or whether it's expanded settlements, it all should be spoken out against. Anything that's going to prevent a peace agreement, we got to speak out against it. And I'll finish.
We're about to get cut off. So I've got to cut you off before you get cut off.
Thank you for cutting me off. I needed it.
30 seconds. You want to wrap it up? 30 seconds.
I just want to thank everybody for spending this invaluable time. I love you all. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. There will be peace because, as Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice, but you also have to make sure that you bend that arc, and that's up to us. Thank you very much. What an honor.
Thank you, Joel. And with that, I'm going to once again thank everyone for hanging in there with us. 2.5 hours, that's quite a bit of time, and I'm probably going to get cut off as I say this, but I think I've got maybe a minute left. I just want to thank everyone, including Dan Spiro, the president of JIDS, Herb Levy, our treasurer, who also helped organize this event, and everyone who attended. Thank you all for being here, and let's stay connected. You know where to find us. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you, Fatima.
Oh,
really
Fatima
well
did a
done.
great job.
I forgot to thank our speakers.
Fatima, you were fabulous,
Great job,
Fatima.
Fatima.
Absolutely fabulous. This was
Okay.
one of
Well
the best
done.
jids ever.
All right.
Well
One
done.
love. Bob Marley said it. One love.
Bye.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Night.
Hey, Kay,
Yeah,
it's been 7 years.
I know. And you've been down in Charlotte, right?
I've been down here, yeah. But most of my work is in DC. I go back and forth. But first of all, you look great, and
Oh.
I'm so glad you're still at it. You know?
Yeah,